Okay, so good morning everyone. Today we'll revise a very interesting topic. This is a tumor which is a benign tumor originating from the nasopharynx. Okay, it is known as angiofibroma, so it means it has blood vessels and fibrous elements. Okay, angio and fibroma, and because it is more commonly seen in a particular age group, which is in the adolescent age group. That's why it is known as juvenile angiofibroma. So the name JNA stands for juvenile nasopharyngeal because it is found in it originates in the nasopharynx and angiofibroma. Now, it is a benign, highly vascular and locally aggressive tumor of nasopharynx, which occurs exclusively in prepubertal and adolescent males. So this is a very typical characteristic. It is benign but very vascular, locally aggressive. See, each of these terminologies are important because if you remember these things, you will know what is the clinical presentation, what is the pathophysiology, and what are the complications of this disease. It is nothing but a tumor which is present in the nasopharynx. So imagine nasopharynx is such a small space. This is a proliferative tumor. So it grows and then it extends into surrounding regions. So though it is benign, it has tremendous capacity of spreading in the locoregional sites. That's why it's locally aggressive and highly vascular. It accounts for 0.05% of all head neck neoplasms. So the term angiofibroma was first coined by Friedberg in 1940. So you can call it as JNA, you can call it as nasopharyngeal fibroma or angiofibroma. So most common age group affected is adolescent males. Mean age of diagnosis is around 14 years. It's more common in boys and it is rarely seen after 25 years of age. Yes, cases have been reported where it has been found in 40-year-old male, 45-year-old male, but that is very, very rare. Okay. So what is the site of origin? Remember, the site of origin is near the sphenopalatine foramen. Where? Sphenopalatine foramen. You all know what is sphenopalatine artery. You all have heard of it. You know what it is. Now this sphenopalatine artery is the most important supplier of this tumor. Why? Because this tumor originates from the boundary or the margin, near the margin of sphenopalatine foramen, and as the name suggests, sphenopalatine. So where is this foramen present? This foramen is present in between the sphenoid bone and the perpendicular plate of palatine bone. So its origin is from non-chromaffin paraganglionic cells of terminal branches of maxillary artery, that is mainly supplied by this source. Okay, so if you focus, this is a bone, all the bones which are forming the nasal septum, and how gradually the sphenopalatine foramen is formed. This is very interesting. Posteriorly, I hope you have the orientation now. This is anterior and this is posterior. So posteriorly the sphenoid and anteriorly is the palatine bone, is the main boundary of this sphenopalatine foramen. Okay, so from this foramen, around the margins, it is said that around the margins of this foramen, the tumor will first initiate, it will start growing, then it will spread to all possible sites. What is this? Obviously the palate, right? The hard palate. Then these are the various bones forming the nasal septum, and posterior most part where it goes and attaches near the sphenoid, this is the sphenopalatine foramen. So theories of origin, most important theory is hormonal theory. Why? Because it is more common in males. So they are saying that it is a testosterone dependent tumor. Then it may be a hamartoma. Sometimes it may arise from undifferentiated epithelioid cells, and desmoplastic, it may be a desmoplastic response of nasopharyngeal periosteum or the fibrocartilage which is present between basi-occiput and basi-sphenoid. So these are the various theories by which they explain how the tumor has originated. It is a benign focal malformation which resembles a neoplasm in the tissue of its origin. So it is a malformation, but it is benign. It is not a malignant tumor. It is composed of tissue elements which are normally found at that site, fibrous elements and vascular elements, but they are growing in a disorganized mass and at a rapid growth, at a rapid pace it is growing. It starts immediately near the sphenopalatine foramen, then it will grow. And what are the spaces? If you can just recall your anatomy of that region, the nasopharynx, what are the adjacent spaces where the sphenopalatine foramen will lead? I told you the perpendicular process of the palatine bone anteriorly and the sphenoid posteriorly. So what are the possible regions where it can spread? It can spread obviously to the nasopharynx, to the nasal cavity, into the paranasal sinuses, right? Where else can it go? If it goes laterally, what is the space immediately behind the maxillary sinus? What is that space? Anybody? What is the space immediately posterior to the maxillary sinus and in front of the skull base? Can anybody tell me? Yes? I'm waiting for your response. The space where this, through this sphenopalatine foramen, the mass will extend and enter into this space. Then there is a fissure lateral to this space. It will cross that fissure and further spread into another space. So now have you got a hint? Anybody? Are you guys listening? All of you are there? Nobody will take an attempt? So this space is known as pterygopalatine fossa. Okay. So it is a large tumor, bilobed or dumbbell shaped, where one portion of the tumor fills the nasopharynx and the other portion extends to the pterygopalatine fossa. So if you see now this diagram, please try to remember. This is the sphenopalatine foramen. Then what are the spaces it can go? It can go to all the sinuses. Okay. It can go to the PPF, pterygopalatine fossa. If it goes inferiorly, it will reach the nasopharynx. It will go posteriorly, it will invade the sphenoid sinuses. Further, if it spreads, it will reach the skull base and reach into the middle cranial fossa. Here it is going to all the sinuses, ethmoid sinuses, sphenoid sinus, maxillary sinus, so all the possible paranasal sinuses. Once it has entered into the pterygopalatine fossa, there is a very small space which is known as pterygomaxillary fissure. From that, the tumor can further spread laterally into the infratemporal fossa. So medially is the pterygopalatine fossa, laterally is the infratemporal fossa. The two fossa are connected by a pterygomaxillary fissure. So that entire spread is possible. So a tumor which is starting in the nasopharynx can come all the way up to the infratemporal fossa. Okay. So anteriorly, so these are the routes of spread of angiofibroma. Anterior growth, yeah, if it spreads anteriorly, it will enter into the nasal cavity. Filled on one side, septum deviates to the other side, and so what happens is a unilateral tumor. It originates on one side, so it will completely fill the nasal cavity on that side. It will press the septum also to the opposite side. Superiorly, if it goes, it will invade the sphenoid sinus, then further up, then cavernous sinus, pituitary fossa, optic chiasma, middle cranial fossa. So sequentially, it will involve all of them. And directly through the anterior skull base, if it breaches, it can reach the middle cranial fossa. See, remember this tumor is benign, so it is ideally not supposed to cause bone erosion or osteolysis, correct? But this tumor is a proliferative tumor, progressively increasing in size, and it goes on increasing in size. Then there is pressure over the bone and constant compression of this by this tumor will cause thinning out of the bone, and then the tumor by its own pressure factor it will go and invade into the spaces. Lateral spread, yes, first it will go to the pterygopalatine fossa, from there via the pterygomaxillary into the infratemporal fossa, and then if it further spreads it can even cause protrusion of the cheek. Greater wing of sphenoid to the middle fossa dura, and yes, if it invades through the infraorbital fissure it can enter into the orbit. Posteriorly, of course, it will go into the nasopharynx. So all possible routes of spread this tumor can go. So what will be the symptoms? So if you remember this diagram, it will be very easy for you to understand, because here is the nasopharynx, here is the nasal cavity, posteriorly is the skull base, and on lateral aspects are the pterygopalatine fossa and infratemporal fossa. Okay. Coming to symptoms, most common symptom is nasal obstruction, because this tumor initially spreads anteriorly, involves the nasal cavity to such an extent that it will cause unilateral nasal obstruction, sometimes even bilateral. Why? Because it is pushing the septum to the opposite side, so the opposite side is also having decreased airway. Second is epistaxis, very important and significant symptom. Patient will experience unilateral and recurrent episodes of painless, profuse and unprovoked bleeding. Each and every term is very important. It is a unilateral bleeding, recurrent in nature, which will be painless, so there will be no history of prior trauma. Okay, profuse, it is not few drops. If once the bleeding will occur, it will be profuse to the extent that patient has to come to the hospital, require hospitalization, and then the bleeding will stop. So he will require a proper nasal packing. So it's a profuse bleeding and unprovoked. Yes, there is no trauma, there is no nose picking, he didn't have a history of fall, no history. Suddenly the child or the boy will complain, suddenly there is a huge rush of blood from his nose, which is really scary for the child and his family. So this is profuse, painless, unprovoked epistaxis. Headache. Then paranasal sinus involvement, so all the features of sinusitis like nasal blockage, headache. Then okay, facial swelling, when will that happen? That is less common, and it will happen when the tumor has spread a lot as far as up to the cheek. Then there will be facial swelling. Other symptoms like rhinorrhea, anosmia, hyposmia, so or any symptom characteristic of nasal tumor, these symptoms will come. Rhinolalia clausa, deafness, swelling of the palate, deformity of the cheek. So if you are able to understand and if you are able to remember the spread of this disease, you can very easily enumerate the clinical features of this disease. Now, what are your findings when you do the proper examination of the patient? This is the nasal septum and this is the lateral nasal wall. So on doing an anterior rhinoscopy, you can see a large, fleshy, exophytic with a smooth surface, a mass you can see which is occupying the nasal cavity. Are you guys able to see the presentation and listen to my lecture? Please respond in yes or no, whatever is the situation. Okay, good. Okay, fine. Because today IT people are also not there, only one person, so they may not be able to communicate. Fine. So on anterior rhinoscopy, we can see a smooth surface, regular, fleshy, exophytic mass which is vascular. You can you see even the prominent blood vessels? Of course, this is an endoscopic picture, but you can see even in anterior rhinoscopy, you can see a fleshy, reddish color mass inside the nasal cavity, sometimes almost up to the nares, okay, external nares. Abundant mucopurulent secretions with bowing of the nasal septum towards the uninvolved side. Okay. Second, posterior rhinoscopy, you can see a pink or red mass filling the nasopharynx, so choana is totally blocked, so you can see that. Sometimes soft palate is displaced inferiorly by bulk of the tumor. Then, so you have done anterior rhinoscopy. you have done posterior rhinoscopy. You are supposed to know these procedures in full detail. How to do anterior rhinoscopy, how to do posterior rhinoscopy, what are the instruments used in doing those two procedures, in which procedure you have to ask the patient to open his mouth, whether you have to ask him to protrude his tongue or not, how you will hold the instrument, what are the structures you will see. Everything has to be known by you. Whenever you are going to present this case as a short case or whatever, you have to know how to examine a patient. So please go through that clinical methods in ENT and read this part also today. What about how everything, anterior rhinoscopy, posterior rhinoscopy, palpation of the nose, cotton wool test, everything you have to know, because you have to check also the nasal obstruction, you have to check for sense of smell, everything. Now, these are all inspectory findings, okay? Intraoral palpation. If you just palpate over the soft palate, sometimes you can see a smooth mass. You can palpate, you can just feel it, okay? Sometimes there is fullness in the space between ascending ramus of mandible and side of maxilla. And if you do an endoscopy, this is the exact endoscopic picture, you get a smooth lobulated pink or reddish mass in the nasopharynx. So you are allowed to do examination as in inspection. What about palpation? No. Strict NO. There is no role of palpation as in palpating directly the mass. If you are feeling with your finger, you are feeling the mass, you are feeling the bulge in the soft palate, that is okay. But the mass in the nose, you are not supposed to touch it. There is a test known as probe test which we do for any mass in the nose like a polyp or an inferior turbinate hypertrophy. Probe test is done. This probe test is contraindicated in case of JNA. You are not supposed to even touch the mass. Why? Because it's a very friable fibrovascular mass. If the tip of your probe is sharp and if you are poking with it, if there is bleeding from the mass, I told you once it starts bleeding, it is a profuse, unprovoked bleeding which even cannot be stopped with topical hemostatic agents. You will require to hospitalize the patient. So any nasal mass, anybody, when you are examining a nasal mass, even friends standing behind you will say, "Dekhna, dekhna, chuke dekhna kya hai." Do not get excited and do things. Always remember one thing which I have told you, because now your students, you will be interns, you will be postgraduates, you will be clinicians. So even if you are not in ENT, if you are in ENT domain, definitely you will see these patients. Even if you are not in ENT domain, you will get patients. Patient may come to you because there are multiple symptoms. No, there is difficulty in breathing. The patient may feel discomfort. He may go to a physician initially. So whenever you are suspecting anything in the nose, remember not to touch it unless you have ruled out JNA. Because in OPD setup, if it starts bleeding, you cannot control it. And by the time you take the patient to OT, the patient has already lost 1 liter of blood. So that is why, please remember, probe test is contraindicated in JNA. You are not supposed to touch the mass at all. And why does it bleed so much? Because remember, this is a vascular tumor and there are no myoepithelial cells over here. When your vessel gets cut, eventually after some time, the vessel will contract and the bleeding will stop. Why that happens? Because there are myoepithelial cells. But here, no myoepithelial cells. So basically these vessels cannot contract. So once they are open, they are open. Can you get the point? So that is why the bleeding will stop only with sustained deep pressure over that particular mass. So that is a very difficult thing to do. So no probe test for these kind of patients. Now signs. There is a nasal or a nasopharyngeal mass or vital mass, proptosis. These are all late stages where it has already spread into orbit. Cheek swelling, trismus, frog face deformity. Why? Because that's once the tumor spreads laterally and it involves the infratemporal fossa, then the patient develops with of course widening of the nose. Remember, the mass has involved the nasal cavity. So there is a huge broad nose. Then serous otitis media because of blockage of the eustachian tube. And this will happen when it has completely blocked the nasopharynx. Okay, cranial nerve involvement of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. Okay. So this is a typical on anterior rhinoscopy. You can see a teenage or a young adult with something like this, a vascular mass coming out through the nose, and he gives a complaint of 2 to 3 episodes of unprovoked profuse bleeding in the last 1 year, then you have to always suspect JNA. A patient presenting with above described sign and symptoms should not undergo biopsy due to risk of bleeding. Never ever try to attempt to take biopsy from a nasal growth if the patient is a young teenage boy and has history of previous epistaxis. Okay. Differential diagnosis is very important. Any nasal mass, what are the differential diagnoses? If it's a fleshy exophytic polypoidal mass you are seeing, the first thing you should say is an antrochoanal polyp. Okay. Large adenoids. Adenoids if it's a nasopharyngeal mass, not in a nasal mass. Okay. If the mass is coming through the nose, then never say adenoids. But if it's a nasopharyngeal mass, then definitely adenoids. Chordoma, tumors of posterior nasal space, and these are the more, you can say, if you are specifically saying tumor which has involved the skull base, then you can say it can be a dermoid, teratoma, neuroectodermal growths, and sometimes it can be a simple cyst, hemangiomas or hematomas or rhabdomyosarcomas. Yes, rhabdomyosarcomas are actually common in this young age. That's why this can come as a differential diagnosis. What are the investigations? So how you will proceed to diagnose and then manage this patient? Simple plain X-ray of the nose and PNS you have to do, where you will see haziness of the sinuses, bone erosion, and once you do this X-ray, you can see in a lateral X-ray you will see that the posterior wall of maxillary sinus is bent anteriorly. Okay, why? What is the space I told you there is a space behind the posterior wall of maxilla which is known as pterygopalatine fossa. So this pterygopalatine fossa, if the tumor occludes that space, it causes pressure on the posterior wall of maxilla to the extent it bends and bows anteriorly. Anterior bowing of posterior wall of maxillary antrum is known as Hoffmann-Miller sign. This is typical. This can even be seen in X-ray, but very clearly seen in CT scan of nose and PNS, which is a mandatory investigation. CT scan of nose and PNS. And what is CECT? What is the meaning of this? I have already written CT scan. So what is the purpose of again writing this? This is contrast enhanced CT scan. This is very important. When we give contrast when we suspect the tumor to have a lot of blood supply in it. In other words, if it is a vascular tumor. If it is a vascular tumor, what will happen? What does a contrast do? You inject it in the venous blood of the patient. You just inject it in a vein. That contrast has a typical characteristic. It will go and wherever there is blood vessels, it will be this contrast will go and mix up. So if your tumor has a lot of blood supply, then characteristically in the CT scan, your tumor, due to the contrast, your tumor will be more enhanced. This is the technology we use when we want to see whether the tumor has a vascularity which is normal or more than normal. Because if it is normal, then what will happen? Your tumor and the surrounding tissue will have equal vascularity, so the contrast will not be taken up. As in, the contrast will be symmetric or diffused everywhere. But if a tumor has characteristically more blood supply than the surrounding tissue, then what will happen? Obviously, because there will be more pooling of blood, so more pooling of contrast. So it will be enhanced. So it will appear more bright compared to the surrounding tissue when you do a CT scan. This is known as enhancement of the tumor. So then you can come to a conclusion that, oh, it is not just a mass, it's not just a tumor, it's a vascular tumor. Then signs of bone erosion or widening of the sphenopalatine foramen. This is a typical CT scan picture I have shown you here with, if you can very well appreciate, this is the anterior aspect, this is the nose, okay, tip of the nose, these are the two maxillary sinuses. So this is obviously the posterior part of the maxillary sinus, right? So here is the nasopharynx. So can you see complete blockage of the nasopharynx? This is the sphenopalatine foramen. Actually, it started on from here. It has involved the nasopharynx extending to the nasal cavity. This is an axial cut. Okay, axial cut means in the horizontal plane. If the plane of the beam is horizontal to the floor, that cut is axial cut. And this is the pterygomaxillary fossa I was talking about, the space behind the posterior wall of the maxillary sinus. And this is, okay, this is Hoffmann-Muller sign. Okay, this one, see, this is the posterior wall normally, how it has bent anteriorly. Can you see? This is Hallman-Miller sign. And this is how angiofibroma histopathologically will look. Staghorn blood shaped blood vessels with endothelial cells but no smooth muscles. That is the reason they do not contract and they bleed profusely. So this is another picture. Now, MRI. So first was X-ray, second was contrast enhanced CT scan, third is magnetic resonance imaging MRI. Delineate and define the soft tissue extent in case of intracranial involvement. So what is the difference between CT scan and MRI? Both are high resolution pictures, but in CT scan the bony cuts and the bony landmarks are very nicely seen, whereas CT scan tends to fall short when it comes to soft tissue detailing, whereas MRI is perfect for soft tissues. So when you want to differentiate between the tumor and surrounding soft tissues, MRI is better. So when you will need it, obviously when the tumor has invaded spaces which has soft tissues around it, that is, it has invaded the brain. If there is intracranial involvement, then once the tumor has breached the skull base, entered into the brain, at that point of time what happens? There is brain tissue, there is tumor tissue. Both of them, CT scan is not efficient to distinguish between them. Then you have to do a MRI. Okay. Fourth, digital DSA, digital subtraction angiography. Okay. This is the concept is, you can say, contrast enhanced CT scan. This is similar to that. Here you again give a dye, inject the dye to the patient, and that dye will straight away go, and it will, in this, the kind of picture that you get, the film is where only you will very nicely see the blood vessels, and you can see a huge tumor blush. That is a bulk of blood vessels which are going and supplying that tumor. So you can exactly know, you can actually charter the course, and you can see which artery or which branch of the maxillary artery is actually going and supplying the tumor. So this DSA is more useful for pre-operative procedure. Okay. Then tumor biopsy obviously is contraindicated. Vessels are thin walled, they lack elastic fibers, absent smooth muscles, so we never go for biopsy. You do all sort of radiological investigations, depend on the history of the patient, and depending on that you have to diagnose and then you have to treat. And this is the staging which is done. This is nothing but, I told you, that's why if you understand the pattern or the route of spread of this tumor anatomically, staging is very easy. Where is the tumor starting? The tumor is originating from which foramen? SP foramen, sphenopalatine foramen, correct. So that sphenopalatine foramen is just where you can say the nose, the lateral wall of the nose and sphenoid posteriorly. So there it is starting. So immediately adjacently where it will go into the nasal cavity or nasopharynx. So that is stage 1, where it has just started to spread. Stage 2, where it starts going to the pterygopalatine fossa or to the paranasal sinuses. A little more spread now has occurred. That is stage 2. So either it is spreading into the paranasal sinuses or laterally into the pterygopalatine fossa. Then what is stage 3? Further, it has spread laterally further. It has crossed the pterygomaxillary fissure and entered into infratemporal. Infratemporal fossa is what? All your cheek, the way, where you can see the upper part of the cheek in front of the ear, that part is the infratemporal fossa. So the bone beneath it, the space beneath that bone. Now that is invaded, and superiorly it has invaded the orbit through the inferior orbital fissure or paracellar region. Paracellar is what? What is cella? You know, cella turcica. So it lodges the pituitary gland. The space beside it is paracellar region. So that is stage 3. Stage 4, it has totally involved the intracranial aspect. It has invaded cavernous sinus, optic chiasma, or pituitary fossa. So you can easily remember stage 4 is intracranial. Okay. So this is the staging of JNA. Why is the staging important? We have seen there are numerous staging in numerous diseases. Staging will always help you to decide at what stage the patient has come to you, whether he has come in stage 1, stage 2, 3 or 4, and that will determine your plan of action. If it is stage 1, obviously little bit of tumor, small tumor, so your operative interventions will be less, patient cure rate will be very high because you can remove it very easily. Okay. Treatment options. Surgery is the gold standard, and it is because it is benign, you will always and always go for surgery. You have to and because it is benign, if you remove it completely, finished, the patient is completely cured of his problem. Second option is radiotherapy. It is reserved only for unresectable tumors. So if the tumor has spread into the intracranial component, then because you cannot resect it from there, so what we do is the extracranial component is operated, the intracranial is treated by radiotherapy. Chemotherapy. Recurrent tumors with previous surgery, if the tumor is a very aggressive type of tumor and it is showing multiple recurrences, then you cannot operate every time, then you have to go for chemotherapy. And hormone therapy is rather a concomitant procedure where you may give an adjuvant hormone therapy also to reduce vascularity before surgery. Okay, so these are the various treatment modalities. But please remember, if anybody asks you what is the treatment of JNA, surgery, 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 surgery. All these will come later. Radiotherapy also you will do only when you have removed the major part, minor which is remaining in the brain, that you will remove. Chemo you will do only when you have already done a surgery 1 or 2 times, patient is again having recurrent episodes, then you have to do. And hormonal, I told you, it is an adjuvant. Along with surgery you can give the hormones. So surgical approaches. Now this is, these terminologies may appear a bit complicated to you, but okay, this let me share this picture with you first. What is this? This is the picture of DSA, digital subtraction angiography. Okay, if you just remember the full form, DSA. So it is a digital procedure, digitally you are filming it. Subtraction means this radiological picture is in such a way that all the other soft tissues are subtracted from this. It is not going to create any confusion. It will only show you the blood vessels. Okay, and the normal blood vessels are going everywhere. Suddenly you can see a rush of blood vessels around this area, which is known as a tumor blush. This is showing that suddenly this part has a lot of blood vessels going into it, so it's a highly vascular tumor. Okay. Now, what is embolization? This is a very new thing, novel technique, where what we do is, I told you, even if you take a biopsy, it is going to bleed profusely. So what will happen when you try to operate it? Can you imagine? Yes, the patients have severe blood loss. They require 2 to 3 units of blood transfusion after surgery, especially those who have, stage 2 or stage 3 tumors. So if somehow we are able to reduce the vascularity of this tumor, I told you many blood vessels are supplying this tumor. When you are going to operate, for those 2 to 3 hours, if we do something so that the blood vessel, the supply is reduced substantially, then obviously it will bleed also very less, isn't it? So if somehow, I will not permanently occlude it, but I will do something so that this supply is reduced almost to negligible amount for 2 to 3 hours, all during that process when I am removing the tumor, then it is so good for me and for the patient, right? The patient is going to suffer minimal blood loss. So this is what is done by embolization. It is nothing but, again, you inject embolizing agents, which are PVA particles, polyvinyl alcohol particles. You just inject them, they go and they will block this lumen, and blood supply will be reduced for some amount of time. And they are made in such a way that after 3-4 hours they will undergo self-embolization. They will dissolve on their own, and once they go dissolving, gradually the blood will again go. But by the time you have removed the tumor, do you understand my point? So this is a very new technique of embolization, wherein you reduce the amount of blood supply or blood loss during surgery. Okay, so these are various approaches. Remember, if it is a small tumor, you can remove it from the nose, well and good, you can remove it, but you will require an endoscope for it. So intranasal endoscopic techniques. Then sometimes tumor is large, it has invaded the nasopharynx, then you have to open the mouth of the patient and go through the palate. So it's a transpalatal. Even large, then you have to go transmaxillary. That means open technique through the maxillary sinus. Okay, that is posterior wall of maxillary sinus has to be approached, has to be removed, then you will see the tumor and you have to remove it, which includes extended Denker's approach, midfacial degloving. See, very detailed information about individual techniques is not required by you, but you have to at least remember the names and a little bit about how it is done. If you just concentrate on the terms, you can understand. Okay, this is through the palate. This is open technique where you are going through the anterior wall, posterior wall of maxilla, and then you are entering into the pterygopalatine fossa, direct infratemporal fossa, and then all these are intracranial techniques, intracranial tumors. So this is what we were discussing, pre-operative reduction of tumor vascularity. So you have to embolize the feeding arteries, whatever are the supplying arteries, you have to embolize them 24 to 70 hours pre-operative by either polyvinyl alcohol foam particles or gel foam particles. And what happens is they tend to resolve over time. Gradually they will dissolve and then they will go away, and by the time the complete blood supply is restored, what happens, you have removed the tumor and those tumor bed has also healed, it has fibrosed. So now no more bleeding will occur. And hormone therapy, what we could give, estrogen therapy may be required, is in fact often given along with your surgery for 3 to 6 weeks. Okay. Sometimes testosterone receptor blockers like flutamide may be given. Radiotherapy, you know what are the conditions when you will give radiotherapy. If it is intracranial or multiple recurrent times, then you need to give radiotherapy. And sometimes cryotherapy. Cryo means, yeah, super cold. If you are giving it, in some studies they have seen that if you give, you can even kill cells by exposing them to ultra negative temperatures or very cold temperatures. That is cryotherapy. Okay. So this is the approach I was telling. We will only focus on the very simple approach, that is intranasal approach for very small tumors. Okay. Small tumor in the nose, sinus or in the nasopharynx can be done by this. Why? What happens is you have endoscope, no, that is your weapon, because endoscope is small but the view it gives is very good. So you can very comfortably remove a lot of the tumor with this. Transpalatal approach, obviously through the palate you will go, you have to remove a part of the palate, you can see the tumor and you can remove it. When you combine transpalatal and sublabial means, always remember, sublabial is when you lift the upper lip and there is the canine fossa where you have to puncture and you have to enter. That sublabial approach, if you combine it with transpalatal, it is known as Sardana's approach for larger tumors, and then transmaxillary for very large tumors. And then you have extended lateral rhinotomy or Denker's. These are all approaches for large tumors. Okay. So that completes your nasopharyngeal angiofibroma. Starting from the definition, it is a benign, highly vascular tumor, its pathophysiology, theories of origin, then the route of spread, which is so important. It arises from the superior margin of sphenopalatine foramen, and then it can extend. Where it can extend to the anteriorly, it will extend into the nasal cavity. Posteriorly, it will extend into the nasopharynx. Laterally, it will extend to the pterygopalatine fossa. Via pterygomaxillary, it will enter into the infratemporal fossa. Superiorly, it can go to the sphenoid sinuses. It can go to the orbit. Further, if it goes, it will invade the skull base. It will enter into the middle cranial fossa. And inferiorly, it will go to the nasopharynx. Then, so this is all spread you have understood. Symptoms you have understood. One thing I have told you, please never forget, try to take a biopsy or even probe a mass in the nose, which in a young teenage boy. Signs, okay, all depending on that, there will be nasal obstruction sometimes, and then there will be epistaxis. So this is very important. Profuse unprovoked epistaxis. Other features like facial swelling, proptosis, headache, and all these will come later on. Then, so this is how the vascular mass will look like on simple anterior rhinoscopy. And then if you do a posterior rhinoscopy, then you have to do a endoscopy. Never take a biopsy. What are the differential diagnoses? You all know. Investigations: X-ray, CT scan of the nose and PNS, MRI, angiography, digital subtraction angiography. I have explained you today what is angiography, and based on these investigations and history of the patient, you have to plan for treatment. Staging of the disease depending on the site of involvement, and treatment is surgery and surgery alone. Radio only for complicated cases, and hormonal you can give along with surgery. Okay, surgical approaches. So that concludes your juvenile angiofibroma. Your nasopharynx mostly is this. Other than that, there is a nasopharyngeal carcinoma. Definitely go through that. What are the sites involved? What is the significance of fossa of Rosenmuller? Okay, I'm not teaching you that as a separate topic. So fossa of Rosenmuller, please see the importance. And nasopharyngeal carcinoma actually has a very typical thing. It tends to involve the cranial nerves. Okay, so just go through that. 2 pages is there in your book, so go through that. That will cover your nasopharynx. We have covered tonsil adenoids, which was a part of your oropharynx. This is your nasopharynx. Hypopharynx, there is nothing much more than a Zenker's diverticulum. So what remains is your sinusitis. I'll have to take a class, and then I think we can shift to larynx, the neck part. Okay, okay then. So goodbye for now, and stay safe and healthy. Okay.